Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on building a marketing culture at your nonprofit. I'm Robert Jones. I'm Vice President of Engagement and Communications at Independent Sector. If you don't know us, we're a community of nonprofits, foundations, and corporate giving programs, all focused on working to ensure that all people in the United States thrive. We're happy to bring you this webinar along with our partners at Prosper Strategy. They're the leading marketing and communications consultancy for the nonprofit sector. Been working with them for over a year now on this series, and I'm very glad to be joined here today with Alyssa Conradi, the president and founder of Prosper Strategies, and Jamila Center, who is the director of marketing and communications at Illinois Action for Children. So hello to both of you.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
As I said, we've been doing this series now for the better part of a year. I know that a lot of you have joined us for earlier installments in this series. So if that's you, welcome back. And if you're new to this series on the Nonprofit Marketing Manifesto, then we're glad that you've joined us. In the last webinar, we covered the final one of our 10 commitments in the Nonprofit Marketing Manifesto. So today we're going to sort of bring it all together by talking about how you can use those 10 commitments to build a marketing culture. Don't worry about taking notes. Alyssa's always great about sending around a recording and slides after the session, so you'll have everything that you need. And so without further ado, I'll just turn it over to Alyssa to get started.
All right. Well, thank you, Robert, and welcome, everyone. Excited to be here with you again today for, the 11th out of our 13 webinars in this series. Before we dive in, would like to take just a moment to help all of you orient yourselves and go to webinar and hopefully greet some of you on the line. So if you can go ahead and find the questions box within the GoToWebinar tool and just answer these questions on the screen. What city are you in? What organization are you with? And what is your role? You can use this questions box all throughout today's webinar to ask questions of myself and of Jamila, and we'll keep an eye on them and answer as many as we can at the conclusion of today's session. So no question is too big or too small. If we can't get to some of your questions, we often will follow up with many of them in a blog post after the webinar. So now that I've introduced myself a bit, and Robert has as well, would like to just welcome a few of you. So we have a joint group of attendees here, Diane and Annalise with WREA in San Antonio, Texas. We have Felina from Tallahassee, Institute for Nonprofit Innovation and Excellence, ED. She's the ED. We have Katrina Dunn in Bethesda, American Fisheries Society Development Director. Who else? We have Debbie from Effingham, Illinois, Parent Center Director. Andrew Holly, Communications Director, not sure which organization. Natalie with Strong Women, Strong Girls in Boston. Get a couple more here. Frankie Ryder, Communications Coordinator at Emergency Family Assistance Association in Boulder, Colorado. We have Chelsea in Calgary, Youth Central, joined by Emma Gammons, Communications Coordinator. If I didn't get your name, don't worry, you're still coming through on my chat. Just many of you can't get to all of you, or we'll take up the whole webinar. So thank you all for joining and being here with us today. So I'll take just a moment to introduce myself and let Jamila do the same, just in case any of you are new to our webinar series and don't know me. As Robert said, I'm Alyssa Conradi, the co-founder of Prosper Strategies. We're a Chicago-based marketing firm that works exclusively with nonprofits like Boys and Girls Clubs, the McCormick Foundation, Illinois Environmental Council, and many more across the country on marketing and brand strategy and implementation. And through that work, we have had a lot of experience, especially this year since the manifesto came out, helping organizations go from being sort of across the board ambivalent about marketing and communications to really fully realizing that it has the power to make a major impact on mission. So I'm really excited for this discussion today, where we're going to share a few ideas on how to have just that sort of transformation And I'm honored to be joined by a friend and colleague of ours, Jamila Center from Illinois Action for Children. So Jamila, I'll hand it over to you. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our attendees?
All right, great. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much, Alyssa and Robert, for having me join you today. As Alyssa mentioned, I am the Director of Marketing and Communications for Illinois Action for Children. Illinois Action for Children is a catalyst for organizing, developing, and supporting strong families and powerful communities where children matter most. We do this through 4 key areas. 1 would be public policy and advocacy. 2 would be provider training and professional development. 3 would be community systems development and organizing, and 4 would be parent and family engagement. I've been with Illinois Action for Children for 3 years, and prior to joining here, I was a director of marketing and communications at Association Forum here in Chicago, which is the Association of Associations, and had the pleasure of taking that organization through a rebrand. And before Association Forum, I spent 8 years at an educational publisher and also had the pleasure of taking that organization through a rebrand. So I'm really happy to have the opportunity to speak with you all today.
Thanks so much, Jamila. And Jamila and I have gotten to know each other over the last year or so while she's been in the process of another rebrand, which you'll hear more about today. But I've been really inspired by all the work she's doing to make marketing a part of her organization's culture, and can't wait for her to share some of that with you and some of the things that she's still hoping to do later today in our webinar. So if you've been following along with the series for the whole year, or you've been on other sessions, you know that each of our webinars has been devoted, as Robert said, to unpacking one of those 10 commitments in our nonprofit marketing manifesto. If you're not familiar, these are the commitments that we feel nonprofits must make in order to see through the full potential of marketing and communications for their missions. So far, our conversations have focused largely on how to make those commitments as marketing and communications people who, as you could hear when I was reading off some of the attendees, many of our attendees on these webinars are marketing and communications people or leaders, executive directors, CEOs, that sort. But we've really focused on how can you do this within the bubble of marketing and communications. But the truth of the matter is that the 10 commitments in our manifesto are really only going to matter and make a real difference if they can move beyond your marketing and communications function and really into the very fiber of your organization, into every aspect of its culture. So that's why today I can't wait to dig into what it means to apply each commitment in the manifesto on a full organization-wide or agency-wide level with Jamila. A little bit of a different agenda from some past webinars. Our plan for today is that I'll spend just a minute refreshing your memory on each of the 10 commitments or introducing you to it if you haven't been on past webinars. I'll share a couple sort of quick and dirty tips about how to make sure that that specific commitment becomes part of your organization's culture in theory. And then the real heart of today's webinar is with each commitment, I'll ask Jamila a question about how she's actually making that commitment happen at her organization in practice across their whole culture. So we'll be kind of going back and forth between some content from me and some questions to Jamila. As always, we will wrap up with plenty of time for questions from you, the audience, which, like I said, you can pop into the questions box at any time. So let's go ahead and dive in. You ready, Jamila?
Let's do it.
All right. So the first of the 10 commitments says that we will recognize marketing as a tool for driving social change. And as I've said on past webinars, this commitment is more of a mindset shift really than anything else. It says that we'll stop treating marketing as a nice to have and begin treating it as a core mission support function that's really capable of moving the needle for our missions and changing the world. We're thinking big with this commitment. And it really underlies everything else when it comes to building a marketing culture. Before we can make marketing a real true priority at our organizations, we need to make sure that everyone who works with us truly sees marketing as mission critical, or at least that that's kind of the prevailing belief among staff and board. So how can you make commitment number 1 part of your organization's culture? There are a couple of, like I said, quick and dirty ideas. You can start by distributing the Nonprofit Marketing Manifesto and this webinar series organization-wide. I think just beginning to plant the seed of these ideas is a great place to start. You can work with your leadership if you're not on the leadership team to make sure that marketing is incorporated into your strategic plan and that it's discussed in key meetings. And just to start to socialize the idea that marketing is more than just putting out brochures and organizing events, you can share examples of other organizations that are using marketing to advance their missions. So almost all of the guests that we've had on our webinar series are good examples of that. Two that I'll call out for you are Feeding America. Someone on their team, Noreen Castor, was on our webinar back in September. And then Communities in Schools, who, if you're in a community that they're advertising in, you've probably seen everywhere lately. Steve Majors on their team will be on our next webinar in December. So two good organizations you can look at and share examples on. But those ideas are just a start, obviously. Let's hear from Jamila on this question first. So Jamila, you've been on a mission over the last year or so to educate really everyone you can at Illinois Action for Children about marketing, and that's a pretty large group of people. You're educating about its importance, the role that marketing plays. Can you give us an example of kind of how you've done that work and something that has worked for you as you've tried to educate your fairly large organization?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. One of the things that I assessed when I first started here was that for our marketing team, we were really lacking in processes or formalization of even how we engaged with the departments around the agencies. So the first thing I did was, put in place just some steps so that we could track what's coming in, what's going out, where are things in the process. But after about a year of having just kind of a very procedural kind of set of parameters in place, I noticed that we were getting requests and we were just executing on the requests. We weren't really thinking about the strategy behind what we were doing or tying in or making connections to other programs or resources that we had in the agency. And the way that it was structured was that basically anyone, 500 plus people could submit a marketing request for whatever they thought that they needed, and we just would do it. So I really started thinking about the fact that, we're a marketing team of 4 people, and how can we build some understanding of the importance of marketing and the role of marketing and the benefits that marketing can have. So I had the idea to create a team of marketing liaisons. So these liaisons would be, I think initially there were about 23 of them throughout the agency working on different programs, where I could then, me and the rest of the marketing team could engage them and educate them and help them understand, the role of marketing and, really just give them some marketing 101 essentials that a lot of folks, particularly in the human services sector, don't necessarily get exposed to throughout their career. So, but to activate that liaison program, the first thing that I had to do was create a business case. So I had to, pull data of the work that we were doing, examples of how we could have done it better. I had to gain buy-in for what is marketing, why is it important. So I kind of had to do a pretty hard sell to our senior leadership team, because this was basically pulling on human resources, human capital on their teams. And, I had some particular parameters about how often and to what extent I wanted to engage them. And then that, once I got the buy-in, it required a fair set of development of processes and procedures, conducting trainings, conducting workshops, ongoing communications on certain topics, and even establishing a process once we had the program up and running for how we would onboard new marketing liaisons due to turnover in the organization. So just by doing that initiative at the organizational level really helped bring the work and the role of marketing elevated to a higher level. These were discussions that we were having frequently at senior management meetings. So, not only was it then the marketing team, but now I had 23 additional ambassadors throughout the agency asking questions to their teams and their directors about the programs. How are they going to reach people about this initiative and that initiative? So that's been one thing that I've done that, I did it really kind of initially for, more self-serving purposes for the role and the work of the marketing team. But ultimately, it really did have a lot of legs and a lot of tentacles that were able to kind of infuse the notion of marketing throughout the agency.
I love it. That's an idea that I've encouraged so many organizations to go for, and you always get a positive response when you suggest it, but then it so infrequently actually happens. So I love that you actually made it happen, and I think it's great that this wasn't just something that could give you kind of fodder to work with or, better alignment from the departments on marketing, but it also just brought marketing more to the forefront of conversation in the organization. That whole move is really what this commitment is about. Thank you,
100%.
Jamila. Commitment number 2, moving on here, says that we will develop a strong brand image and identity in alignment with our mission and values. And this commitment asks organizations to recognize that their brands are one of their greatest assets and to treat them with the care that they deserve. It asks nonprofits to see brands as sort of that first way that people begin to understand and interact with our missions and our values. So to make this commitment a part of your culture, a few ideas, and this springboards a bit off of what Jamila was just talking about. You could consider holding quarterly brand trainings that explain the rationale behind your brand and how it should be used. You can make sure everyone on your team has access to quality brand assets. So we're talking about different versions of your logo, key messages, imagery that's high quality and approved for use in different cases, that sort of thing, video content. And then you can consider rebranding if your brand doesn't align with your mission and values. And if you do that, you can involve a diverse group of staff in the process, which helps this commitment go beyond just the marketing and communications or leadership teams. That last point is one that I know Jamila can speak to, which brings us to our next question. So Jamila, we heard about this a little bit already. You're in the process of a rebrand. Why did Illinois Action for Children choose to rebrand, and how are you going about involving staff in the process in a way that's helping embed brand and marketing more deeply in your culture?
Yeah, yes, we are deep in the thick of things with our rebrand. It's so exciting. I get really geeked out about this kind of stuff. But, one of the things that happened with Illinois Action for Children was rapid growth, right? So we grew, we added on new programs, we added on new programs, and that was great. That's a great thing to do. We can reach and support more people, but as you grow from kind of a smaller, more reactive organization where you can just kind of be a lot more opportunistic and capitalize on things quickly, there wasn't really much time taken to pause and say, okay, now that we've added this into our work, how might that affect the perceptions that folks have? Or how well is this work aligned to other work? And so, while we continue to be very nimble, once you reach a certain size or stature, I think there has to be a bit of calculated risk assessment that hadn't previously really been at the forefront of the conversation. And so then as a result of that, I noticed that, pretty much immediately after I started, I noticed that just our visual identity and our messaging practices were all over the board. I mean, anything could look any way. People were creating things in Word with stretched images, stretched logos, still using our 45th logo in our 48th and 49th years of existence. It was just a lot was going on, and no one really seemed to be kind of reining it in. And then another key driver was that our 2015 our strategic plan that was created in 2015, which is a 5-year strategic plan, required diversification of our revenue streams. But it was really hard to have a solid way to ask for particularly corporate support when our financials showed, substantial revenue coming from government contracts. So we needed to think about how we were talking about our work around that reality and our needs around the reality that, yes, a lot of our programs are funded through government contracts, but those programs are very restricted. And so they don't support innovation. They don't support really building and capacity. So there was kind of that. And then the third thing that really contributed to the decision to rebrand was, bless my lucky stars, here we are, 2019 is our 50-year anniversary. So, I've learned actually from my 2 previous organizations that a major milestone really can give some solid legs for a rebranding initiative to stand on, because you're celebrating your past, you're reflecting on all that you've done and all that you've accomplished, but it's also the absolute perfect time to set a bold new vision for the future. And so with that, we decided to rebrand. Now, in terms of how we involved staff in the process, I would say that in terms of making the decision to rebrand, a broad sector of staff was not really involved. Those decisions were really made at the executive leadership team. But since we have been going through the process, we've engaged different segments of our staff in different ways. So, we've done a lot of surveying, stakeholder interviews, audits and things like that folks, gathered up examples of materials that they liked and found effective, or materials that they didn't like and people were confused by it. So we really engage staff in that way by asking them, what tools do you have, what collateral do you have that works, that doesn't work, how do you use this, and things like that. But really, a lot of the decision making was done at the executive level.
Sure. Yeah, and that's common. I think the involvement from the perspective of just helping staff come along with the rebrand because they feel engaged is really important, but I also think rebrands can create a really important venue for conversation about what brand is and why it matters, that even long after the rebrand's complete, can really serve your organization well. So even though the decision-making wasn't happening necessarily across a shared committee of staff, the fact that staff was involved and brought along in the process, I see as really positive.
Yeah, I guess one more way that I've really brought staff along in the process was we have bi-monthly meetings with our full management teams. So that's about 70 people. And so this year, so far, I presented on rebranding at 2 of those meetings, and I also did a presentation at our all agency meeting that we had with all of our staff in June, and I actually also did a presentation before we officially started the work, but we were planning to launch the rebranding work in December. So I have taken advantage of any opportunity I can get to get in front of as many people as I can and just really help them understand what the process is, why we're doing it, where we are now, and what's coming next.
Yep. And I love that you've been socializing it for quite a long time now, so that it would be very hard to have not caught wind of the fact that the organization's rebranding or why, even though you're so large. So moving on to commitment 3 here. This commitment says that we will build cohesion internally and communicate with consistency externally. This one asks us to recognize that our organizations can't achieve their full potential for mission impact if our stakeholders present an inconsistent image of who we are and what we stand for. But an important caveat on this one, we want to make really clear that we're not suggesting that any organization forces a brand identity or image on its staff and stakeholders and kind of turn staff and stakeholders into robots parroting the same key messages in the same way over and over again. What we're suggesting is that we make the development of our brands a participatory process, sort of as Jamila just talked about, and give our internal stakeholders a role, or at least some hand in shaping our brands, and the license to then, once they're developed, personalize those brands in a way that represents our organization well, with a set of guideposts that ensures consistency and cohesion, but still gives some freedom. It's about having guidelines, not strong rules. So to make this a part of your organization's culture, let's say you've already made brand development a participatory process, as Jamila kind of discussed in the last question. After that, we suggest creating a brand kit with both messaging and visual guidance so that every person on your staff has the tools they need to stay within those guideposts but still personalize. We also suggest creating standards for when communications need to run through the marketing and communications department and when they don't. That can be a really difficult thing for many organizations to handle. And we love to host role plays where staff can experiment with using the brand and the messaging that you've established for your organization in sort of real world like situations that are applicable to their jobs. So one example might be we work with a senior services organization. We'll host different workshops with the caregivers on staff versus those who do art and music therapy, and ask them to sort of use the messaging that we've developed in talking with people who they interact with day in and day out, residents or people who come to take advantage of programs. So Jamila, I know you've made a lot of progress around this one in the last year. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you've helped specifically on that second point I mentioned, staff understand when they can develop collateral and messaging and release it out into the world without marketing and communications, and when they need to run things by you, because I know that's something that a lot of us probably struggle with.
Yeah, I think, I think generally I'm a fairly nice person, but I do tend to be direct, and I don't really hide from things that happen. So what I started doing really was when I would discover things, when someone would say, Jamila, you should probably see this, and it was something that someone created that looked crazy and was horribly messaged and all these things, I would bring it up at the senior management meeting. And I would say, look guys, this is what I'm talking about. This is why we cannot have these things out here. This is unclear for these reasons. This is misaligned. So, I do think it's important that you want to be as nice as possible, but you do have to give people examples of when something is not correct, why it's not correct, and what that detriment is. So, kind of a little negative reinforcement, I guess, if you will, is one thing. But what that has resulted in is people are now asking about just about everything. They're running it by. Hey, we're partnering with so and so on this initiative, and they want to put our logo on that flyer, and here's the draft of the flyer, and is that okay? So folks are really, really taking it seriously, and really starting to understand that, this is a big organization. We have a fair amount of influence, and we have to protect, how we are positioning ourselves and in what ways we are aligning with certain organizations. So there have been a couple of instances where, we might have done a partnership with an organization or, agreed to promote their whatever it was, but, did we feel comfortable having our logo on their collateral? No, not exactly. So I really just think that reinforcing it and, again, having those marketing liaisons has just been so valuable because they really do get it, and they really do kind of serve as the front lines, and they are telling, their directors, hey, we should probably check with marketing on this before we put it out there. So, and then I think also just having a process with the documents that a form that's clearly defined on, what needs to be provided and, what we're trying to achieve. I have a checklist for the liaisons of if you're doing this type of project, these are questions to ask. These are things you need to submit with your request. A marketing brief for new initiatives. This is to help your team think about your program, really from what are the outcomes you're hoping to achieve, what are the risks associated. So all of these kinds of things, but just, reinforcing and reinforcing and reinforcing. I mean, I have, just been really, I guess, probably over communicating in some ways, the importance of this, but, that seems to be working.
Yeah, well, I don't think you can over-communicate it because what will happen if you don't over-communicate it is just that your department gets completely overloaded and you're doing too many things at once to do any one thing effectively, while at the same time all your other departments of your organization are putting things out into the world that negatively reflect on your brand and create confusion. So I feel like no communication about this is too much until you see zero issues. You just have to keep reinforcing the point. And I love what you're all seeing on the screen here is Illinois Action for Children's marketing request form. I love that, Jamila, you've standardized a lot of this and you've made sure that people are going to make requests of your department to support certain things, that you have the information you need to get started. And I especially love that you're really clear on designating a final approver. I've just heard so many times from organizations that we work with that this is one of the biggest pain points, that they'll get requests from programs or various different departments and it's never clear who they're actually supposed to work with on a project, too many cooks in the kitchen, and things don't get done well or efficiently because of that. So I think anything you can do like this and like the things Jamila talked about around reinforcement is really positive.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So commitment number 4. This is one I know you're passionate about, Jamila. This one says that we will treat all of our stakeholders as brand ambassadors. And this commitment asks us to recognize that every person that we interact with through our organizations has the potential to amplify our brands, our mission, and our impact. So that includes our staff and the people they come in contact with every day, volunteers, board, even program participants. A few quick ideas for making this commitment part of your organization's culture. One key area where we see brand advocacy sort of begin, at least on a staff level, is on social media. So you can start by giving employees content and encouragement to post on social media. Often when we see an organization do this for the first time, the response that we hear from employees is, oh, I didn't really ever think about the fact that I could post on behalf of or in support of our organization from my personal social profiles. Some people, of course, feel uncomfortable combining their personal social presence with any content about work, but a lot of people are excited once they're given sort of the permission and encouragement to do it, to get involved in that way. We've seen organizations do some interesting things around creating brand ambassadorship rewards, where rather than sort of a standard employee of the month, they're handing out awards for employees who seem to be going out of their way, going the extra mile to be ambassadors for the brand in their day-to-day work and even maybe in their personal lives. And then a third way to turn staff, at least, and others in some cases, volunteers, into brand ambassadors is to involve those folks in story gathering. So for those of you on the line today who are in a marketing and communications role, you have an almost endless need for stories, and they're often much easier for your program staff and others to come by. So create a system for getting others at your organization to think about story gathering in their work and to feed you fodder for communications collateral, for fundraising campaigns, that sort of thing, based on just the work that they're doing every single day. So this is a commitment that is really important, but it's much easier said than done, like many of them. And Jamila, I know you're working on building a more formalized brand ambassador program now at Illinois Action for Children. So would love to just hear a bit about what you're doing there, sort of what your goals are and what progress you've made so far.
Okay. Well, I guess there's one thing that we did, I guess, in an informal way internally, as we were celebrating our 50-year anniversary. We came up with this idea on to do 50 ways IAFC makes an impact. And so we had members from our 50th celebration committee reach out to different programs, and we had like a whole little schedule of who would contribute when. And basically that was to get our programs to provide a story that we posted on our intranet in terms of an impact that was being made. So it could either be someone from a member of our staff doing something within their community, not necessarily even related to the work of the agency, but just some way that someone is making an impact, or it could be based on our clients or a partner and, an outcome that they've achieved that's been positive. So that's been really fun for people to participate in, just related to our 50th. And I'm definitely thinking about ways to keep that type of thing going on over time. But in terms of a more formalized brand ambassador program, we are working on this just now. Actually, our first meeting to discuss it, I think, is on Tuesday of next week. But ultimately what it's looking like so far is that our initial focus is going to be internal, because we do have more than 500 employees, but we're also really going to be working closely with our associates board, which is called Associates in Action. And so one of the things is to build a common language for how we talk about our work that's not it's not robotic. It's not necessarily like reading a script, but it's not a complete freestyle either. So we really want to teach people how to connect the next iteration that we will soon unveil of our mission and our vision to the specific areas that they work in and why that's important. And the hope is that this is going to strengthen the personal connection that employees have not only to their work, but also to the agency as a whole. I would say that, though, by and large, a lot of the people who work here do feel very deeply connected to the work and to the mission. So, that's not a heavy lift, but it is something that we would like to see more formalized in terms of giving people kind of elevator pitch or some talking points and just ways to make connections. And then from there, it's how we can inform and influence within our networks and communities. So, because we interact with so many people, and particularly with our clients, we serve 175,000 families annually. So it's quite a great impact. So we just want to make sure that our messages are connected. We want to help our team also be able to uncover and share stories of the impact that we make. And so what this looks like is a little flag, a sprinkle of road shows, and what I'm calling 10 Tops, which is a series of 10-minute kind of tips, videos that myself and members of my team will produce and provide on our intranet for things like how to ask for an online review, how to navigate negative comments, how to amplify your impact, how to avoid poverty porn. So that's kind of the idea internally, is that, we kind of have a set of goals of what we're hoping to achieve, and then how we look at it is we want to get people excited with some, stuff reflective of our new brand. We've got actually a little splash video that I just downloaded earlier today that we're going to do to unveil our new look and tagline. So, just really thinking of ways to get people excited, but then also give them tools to share that message out with the world. So, even on their social media networks, on our intranet, we'll have a series of badges and things like that, frames that people can put on their Facebook and Instagram profiles.
So awesome. Such an inspiring example. And those of you who are thinking, wow, that sounds like a lot, remember that Jamila's organization is quite large. Even if you took and just implemented one or two of those ideas, it could make a huge difference at a smaller organization. So hopefully that gave you a lot of food for thought. I know it did for me. Moving on here to commitment number 5. This one says that we will develop a marketing plan that aligns with our strategic plan and recognize that marketing can impact every one of our strategic goals. This is my favorite commitment. This is the one that I preach everywhere I go. So this one essentially is just saying that marketing needs to be an essential part of the strategic planning process, or at the very least, a marketing plan needs to be a response to a strategic plan and an organization-wide decision on what our most important goals are. Marketing should not operate in its own bubble without a connection to the strategic plan, or it will not be the mission-critical tool that it can and should be. So a couple ways to see this commitment through on an organization-wide level. First and foremost, assuming you've already gotten buy-in from leadership that marketing matters, hopefully you have, I suggest that you advocate for devoting at least 25% of your strategic planning process to marketing planning. Whether strategic planning happens every 5 years or every year, marketing is that critical that it should be that large of a part of your strategic planning process, if not sort of woven into every part of strategic planning. And then once you have a solid strategic plan in place, or at the very least a vision of what your organization's goals are over the next X number of years, you can use the Essential Nonprofit Marketing Plan template that we've introduced in previous webinars to work through the process of establishing marketing goals that align with your organization's goals. I have a link to that within the chat box, which just note is separate from the questions box if you're interested in downloading that template. And then once you have your marketing plan in place, it's aligned with your strategic plan. In order to make this sort of an organization-wide mindset shift, share a top-level summary of your marketing plan organization-wide. And finally, share regular progress reports with your entire organization, if you can, about the progress that marketing and communications is making toward that plan, which you'll remind them when you share is aligned with your organization's strategic plan. So I just think this one is so critical, and Jamila, I know you've been doing a lot of work on this one lately too. So tell us more about how you've worked to align your marketing and communications plan with your strategic plan, and then how you sort of shared aspects of that, or even just basic things like what marketing does and what it means for the organization outside of your department.
Yes. Well, I will say first and foremost that while I've made some progress in this area, this is one of the areas that I feel like I still have a way to go. And that really, has a lot to do with the way that this organization is structured and goes about its work, which while there is, a 5-year strategic plan, from that point, it's really up to any different department team to figure out how their work is going to support achieving what was defined in that strategic plan. So because we do in many cases operate in a way that is fairly siloed, I've had a hard time wrapping my head around creating an organizational marketing plan. I have been successful, in creating the marketing communications plan surrounding our 50th celebration, because that was something that kind of I had a little bit more control of, and definitely will be infusing our brand rollout plan into other marketing plans that will take effect starting in January. So the way that I've worked it, though, which is, the progress that I've made is when there is a new initiative. For example, we just, I don't know, maybe last week or whatever, the last couple of weeks launched this series of research reports. And in the past, we would probably work with our research team to do the design of research reports. We might send a media release and post the reports on our website, and that would literally be it. And so, when I started thinking about all of the effort that's been invested, and, we have a new vice president of public policy and advocacy, so I said, look, if we're going to be doing this work, we need to really put it out there and share it with the world. This is what's demonstrating our thought leadership. This is really what's going to help drive policy changes and things of that nature. So we really need to leverage this. So let's put together an actual plan for releasing these reports. And so You know, I was actually pretty excited that Tuesday, was that yesterday? Yeah, that was yesterday. During our senior management meeting, she, chimed in and was talking about this launch and talking about, hundreds of people have downloaded these reports and the increase in signups to be informed of our research and, the degree to which they were shared. So, it was really a great testament to what can happen really when you plan your work and work your plan. So more of that will come, and I think the fact that it was shared by someone other than me also was beneficial because she really, I didn't even know she was going to talk about that, but she just talked about how she partnered with the marketing team, how we built this robust plan, integrated plan with a lot of social media, a lot of web stuff, little explainer videos, infographics. So, it was a process, but I think that folks are just really starting to see the results of what can happen when you have a plan. So even if you can't get to the point of developing an organization-wide plan, I definitely encourage you all to take one, fairly significant initiative and establish a plan and then report against that plan when it's completed. And I think from there, you'll probably gain some good traction into doing even more.
I love that idea because, yeah, you're right. Unfortunately, the situation that you're in where the strategic plan doesn't really make it possible to have an organization-wide marketing plan is pretty common. And sort of breaking down the same concept to a specific initiative can be a really good starting point that just kind of socializes the idea, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to have someone else talk about the success.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, here we are with the budget commitment. This one, commitment number 6, says that we will invest properly in marketing and view it as core mission support, not overhead. This commitment goes on to say that we will stop shortchanging marketing in favor of other more important functions at our organizations and recognize that it's essential for our programs and services to be sustainable, that we market them well, that people understand what we're doing, that we're reaching the right people. More than any other commitment, I would say this is the one that basically requires you, if you're a marketing or comms person, to go beyond your department and have at least some reach into your organization's culture because you're asking to be part of the overall budget. So let's talk a little bit about some things that you can do to make this commitment part of your culture. I think you can start by having just really frank conversations with your leadership and maybe your board, if you have that access, about the importance of marketing investment to your mission. None of this will work unless you can get your leadership team and possibly your board, depending on what role they play in budget planning, on board with the idea that marketing matters. And so some of these earlier commitments about the mindset shift and how to begin to build that really come into play there. And then to ensure that you have an appropriate budget, you can share benchmarks about what other organizations are spending on marketing and communications as you work to set your budget. You can find some of those benchmarks in our budgeting webinar. I think that was our August webinar, which I'll make sure you get a link to in our follow-up email from today's webinar. That one's not in chat. And then finally, you can make sure that your staff and donors and funders understand that the overhead myth, hopefully you're all familiar with that, is just that it's a myth, that marketing and other so-called administrative costs don't necessarily take away from programs and services. Instead, they allow programs and services to grow and stay sustainable. So any work you can do to build that mindset really can help. So Jamila, with your rebrand this year and some other big marketing spends, I'm sure around the anniversary, you must be doing something right to get buy-in on marketing investment. So tell us a bit more about what you've done to make some inroads in this regard with your leadership team and possibly your board. I'm not sure how much you discussed this with them, but what are you doing that's working? And if you want to share where you're struggling too, that's also helpful.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things that I learned a couple of jobs ago is that in marketing you need to have some key allies in the organization. And number one is your chief information or technology officer, because as time goes on, the interconnectedness between marketing and communications and technology, and I guess you can even call it marketing technology, right, is a thing. So having a good relationship with your technology leader person is a great idea. And the second ally that I seek to make is with our chief financial officer, because I need to spend the money, and sometimes if I can even have a one-on-one conversation with her about this initiative that I'm thinking about, this technology that I need, and here's why I need it, and then, I'm having the conversation with my boss, and then, it's getting presented or whatever, that business case is just a little bit easier when you already have some allies. And so some of the things that I do, though, when I'm presenting a new initiative is the first thing is I like to present evidence. So, one of the things that really drove me crazy in my career that someone said to me was like, oh, well, we have this Jamila project. And I was like, no, stop right there. This is not a Jamila project. A Jamila project would involve trips to New York to go shopping and eat gourmet food and drink wine, right? This is an organizational project completely. Stop saying that. So make sure that you are positioning whatever it is you're requesting with some evidence as either being detrimental if you don't, and here's the reasons why, or so beneficial if you do, and here's how we're going to advance. For me, one great example is in our Google reviews. So if you look at our Google reviews, this was kind of one of the things that I used to help justify our rebranding efforts. Look at Google reviews. They are horrible. We're at like a 2 stars. Like, that is terrible. And I said, but if you read these reviews aren't even about Illinois Action for Children. These reviews are about the Child Care Assistance Program that we administer. And so we have to figure out a way to differentiate us from them, even though we're doing the work. 2 years down the line, if we don't get recontracted, we don't do that work, but yet Illinois Action for Children is a 2-star organization because of it. So that was kind of just an example of using an example. Another thing is strategic plan alignment. So again, taking the emphasis off, yourself and your team and what you need from a marketing perspective. And if you can, tie it back to your strategic plan. Our 2015 plan said, talked about being a data-informed culture. Well, in order to be a data-informed culture, we need the tools to capture and segment our audience and understand their behaviors and track, our digital communications, right? So that was a very straightforward tie back. One of our core capabilities, so from a human resources kind of cultural standpoint, is clear communication. Well, to communicate clearly and effectively, we have to have some parameters about how that takes place, both within the organization as well as externally. And then finally, I'm not afraid to say, look, I need help, or we can't do that, or, we should be doing this, and this, but we only have capacity to do one of those 5 things. But here's what we could benefit if we did those other things. So you need to invest. Somebody's got to come up with the money so we can get some consultants involved or whatever it needs to be. So really, I would say at the end of the day, tie it back to something that has less to do with the marketing and more to do with the organization and the outcomes.
Yes, I love it, which really goes back to the core of the entire manifesto, right? Make marketing about mission, impact, and outcomes, not about, pretty collateral and beautiful imagery.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. The struggle is real, but thank you for that. It's helpful just to hear real-world examples of how this work gets done. So this next one, commitment number 7, says that we will ensure that marketing is overseen at the highest level of our organizations and contributed to by everyone on our teams. Goes on to say that we'll give marketing and communications a seat at the leadership table and a spot on the board meeting agenda, which does seem pretty essential to everything we're talking about on today's webinar. So how can you see this commitment through on a cultural level? First, I think when it comes to getting a spot at the leadership table or on the board meeting agenda, start by just asking. I am always a little bit surprised at how often we work with clients who don't have that seat, and then we just simply pose a question, well, have you ever asked to be included? And the answer is almost always, well, no, I didn't think I could ask. You might not get promoted, depending on what your title and role is right now, to Chief Marketing Officer or something of that level, or get to go to every board meeting or every leadership team meeting. But if you simply ask for some exposure, you'll likely get more than you have today. If you have none, even if you can get annual exposure to those sorts of meetings, it might make a difference. And when it comes to making sure that everyone contributes to marketing across your whole organization, consider whether you can work with your leadership team to write at least one marketing responsibility, even if it's just something simple like gathering one story from a program participant each year into the job descriptions of just about everyone on your team, or into the job descriptions of specific people who, like in Jamila's case, might serve as marketing liaisons. A little bit can go a long way. So, Jamila, how have you continued to increase attention given to marketing at leadership and board meetings since sort of discovering and working with the manifesto, and I guess just over your career as a whole? It sounds like you've been getting a lot more of that kind of exposure in the last, I don't know, year or so while you've been working on the rebrand. So tell us a little bit about how you've done that so effectively.
Yeah, well, the board here is definitely a little different in how they operate and what their role is. So for me here, in terms of our board of directors, what's most important is about keeping them informed. They were asked at a few stages for their input, but keeping them informed is pretty much my priority for our board. So in order to do that, because I did make the case of, we can't just tell them that we're launching on this initiative and then a year later there's, this whole new identity and this whole new messaging and they have no idea how we got there. So I have either prepared a robust report specifically on the rebranding initiative or gone and presented at the board meetings in person. And, I did have to do some reiterating of how they had to be brought along. It was first requested that I just do my normal update for the board reports, and I said, do people even read that? I mean, let's be honest. Do board members actually read all these reports? It's the whole binder, pages long. I don't really think so. And from the materials that we post on our website, I can see how often those links are clicked. And it's not a ton. So, I just really said, I actually used that as evidence. I said, look, out of all of them, less than half of them open the monthly newsletters. For the board materials on the board portal, only 3 of them actually click on the links. Now, I know we send it to them in paper format, so maybe they're reading it, but we don't know that. So we have to get in front of them and have to present this. So that's really kind of, how it's been. And, it seems fine.
Yeah, I love it. I love
and
the
I think
idea of using digital tracking to make your case too. Crafty.
Oh, yeah, totally. I'm like, well, look, I can, somebody asked me, I think our executive assistant, she was like, do board members actually read these newsletters? I was like, about half of them read them all the time, and half of them read them almost never.
Right. Yep.
So, yeah.
That's helpful. Yeah, we have all these tools at our disposal to understand how people are actually engaging with our communications, and that goes not just for board communications, but everything, and better understand how to spend our time and money. So I think we'll get to that one in a minute, actually, that idea. But commitment number 8 says that we will use our brands and marketing to build partnerships and advance the broader causes that we are focused on. This one just goes on to say that we're not an island, and that we realize that our organizations are strongest when partnered with other nonprofits, and in some cases with for-profits or government entities. But one thing that I feel passionately about is that the responsibility for partnership should not fall squarely on the shoulders of marketing and communications people. It should be part of, again, here, your organization's culture. So a few ideas for making that happen. First, identify the sorts of partnerships that you want each department to be thinking about. You might want one program department to think about and look for partnerships with local universities, while another thinks about partnerships with companies that might be interested in corporate volunteering. Give people kind of clear marching orders, whether those come from you or from someone else. And then provide each department or anyone who's getting involved in building partnerships with marketing materials. Could be as simple as just a one-pager so that they can start to do their own partner recruitment. And finally, offer to collaborate when partnership opportunities arise. So if someone sees a good opportunity for a partnership, no matter if they're in marketing or some other function in the organization, offer to collaborate with them to lend sort of the marketing aspects that are needed to promoting the idea of the partnership and securing the partnership. So it should really be a team effort where marketing plays a role but isn't necessarily the lead. So Jamila, on this front, I'm curious to hear how others outside of your department have helped your organization build partnerships and maybe how you kind of supported that work within your department as well.
Yeah, one of the things that we did in terms of, I'll give two examples, but they are both related to corporate partnerships and corporate engagement from some of our corporate supporters. So in the building that we are located in, where our headquarters office is, there's Starbucks here, and we noticed, I don't even know who noticed, somebody noticed, that they had some kind of fundraising situation going on in store. And so we had been trying to think of ways that we could build some kind of relationship with Starbucks, but really didn't know how to approach it. So we had the idea of what if we asked Starbucks to do a book drive. And so we talked with, our development team talked with the manager of the Starbucks in our building, who then brought in the regional manager, and it turned out that we had something like 70-something Starbucks in the area, put out bins and, our posters and whatnot, and do a book collection for us. So that was just one thing that just was literally based on physical location, and the fact that so many members of our staff go to Starbucks every day, multiple times a day in some cases, and so we have, relationships with folks there.
Yeah.
Another interesting example of leveraging a partnership was, so we have 4 directly operated early learning centers in the south suburbs, and we had, one of them was, I guess I'll just say it's kind of in the midst of like a housing project community. And so while there was space for a playground, there wasn't really a tremendous actual playground there, and it was not appropriate for the little children, ages 5 and under. So this is kind of like a phased initiative, but first we did a crowdfunding campaign for Let's Build a Playground, so that we could get the equipment. And then with one of our corporate partners, while we had a nice playground, we really wanted to beautify the front of the building, and so we had a new partner located in that area, and so we created kind of a community service event where that partner sent their staff over to our early learning site, and they did kind of both planting and flowers and mulching and all that good stuff outside, and then they also did planting of like tomato plants and some other vegetable plants in little pots that the children could then take home and grow with their families over the summer. So, those are just kind of 2 examples of partnerships coming from different areas. So, with the early learning one, it started with kind of that crowdfunding so we could get the playground, but then other partners in the area kind of noticed and wanted to contribute in some way, so it built on from there.
So awesome. I love it. Really, really good ideas. And it's awesome how something like the Starbucks example can work out just because you're kind of right place at the right time and, you know, you're there in the building, you have a relationship. All right, 2 to go here. So commitment number 9 says we will avoid at all costs sacrificing the dignity of those we serve for the sake of our marketing and communications goals. This is such an important commitment. It goes on to say that we recognize our marketing efforts are not a success if they marginalize or stereotype the people we aim to serve, even if we're doing that in order to pull on a donor's heartstrings or get support. This commitment is really all about pivoting from exploitative communications to assets and strengths-based communications, which we've been talking about a ton on our blog, and we've had recent webinars, obviously, on it. So there's so much we can do here to make this commitment a part of our culture on a marketing level, at least. Some things that I suggest are first creating a set of standards specific to your organization for assets and strengths-based stakeholder representation. You probably saw, if you were on the September webinar, the second one, we had 2 in September with Dory McWhorter of YWCA, an example of that from them, how they've created their own guide to they call it, I think, their equity glossary or something of that nature. You can create something similar for your organization to sort of say these are the standards we hold ourselves to. And then distribute that staff-wide, ideally hold some trainings and open discussions on it. And then finally, I love the idea of creating some sort of streamlined reporting process that staff can use at your organization to flag anything they see that you're putting out into the world, not necessarily just marketing and communications, but anyone from your organization that seems misaligned with those standards that you've set, or that kind of raises a red flag that maybe we're communicating in a somewhat exploitative or needs-based manner, deficit-based manner. So, Jamila, I'm sure this comes up at your organization, as at most. We've had some conversations about this year, you and I. Do you have an example you can share of a recent situation where you worked with someone else at Illinois Action for Children to make needs-based or maybe a little bit exploitative communication more strengths or assets-based?
Yeah, definitely. This was actually a big part of the conversation as we were rewriting our vision statement. That is a component of our rebranding initiative, is to rewrite our vision statement. And we just went through way more iterations than we had initially planned, because we were really focused on removing any kind of deficit-based language and really wanted it to be assets-based language. And so things that have been in our vocabulary for years: vulnerable children and families, at-risk children and families, children living in poverty, which can't totally get away from that because that is like a thing. But, you know, really examining all of those words and thinking about how can we reframe this message so that we're not presenting it from such a low point to begin with. It's hard work, and it really is. But I really feel like our messaging when it comes out is going to be so much more positive and uplifting and focused on building. So it's really good, but it's not easy. So what I've started working on actually for myself is just a list of words or phrases to replace. So when I read something, you know, that might say, you know, at risk or, you know, deficits or something like that, triggers so that I can identify those words and reword them.
Yeah, that's a really great way to go about it.
Yeah, but it is really, really tricky sometimes when, you know, purely when we are talking about difficult subjects. You know, we talk about childhood trauma, we talk about adverse childhood experiences. So there are bad things that we have to talk about, but I think what's most important about that is talking about the things as bad things, not the children and the families as being the bad things. And so that's
Right.
kind of where it really becomes nuanced and requires an extra level of thought.
Yeah, that framing is a really good way to think about it. Two other resources that might be helpful in that regard that I'll pop into the reminder or the follow-up email from today's webinar are the Some of Us Progressive Style Guide and Frameworks Institute. Both have done a lot of research around language to use and not use as we move toward a more strengths-based and asset-based approach. But I agree, it's hard work. It's absolutely critical work. Moving us on to the 10th commitment, and Jamila, I'm going to skip the question for you on this one so that we can make sure to get to a few audience questions since we only have about 5 minutes left, but I'll just briefly touch on the commitment. This one, commitment number 10, says that we will measure the impact of marketing on our missions and continually optimize our efforts to drive more social change. It says we're unwilling to accept the notion that it's impossible to measure the impact marketing makes on our missions, but this is another area where, yes, it's possible, but the work is hard. We just had our webinar on this last month, so a lot more material can be found on it there. But to make this commitment part of your culture, a couple of things to consider. First, I would suggest standardizing department-wide versus organization-wide marketing reporting. There's a lot of things that you might report on just for yourself if you're a one-person marketing and comms team, or for your department that you don't need to share with the entire organization. So kind of delineate those two reports. In order to make sure that you're reflecting your impact outside of just your department, request regular inputs from other departments for your reporting. And then share an easily digestible, very brief organization-wide report as frequently as you can, quarterly or maybe annually, that shows the impact that marketing is making. And kind of like Jamila talked about with her one plan surrounding specific events and initiatives, continue to show that impact. So just a couple ideas, some food for thought there. We'll skip over Jamila's question with our last 3 to 5 minutes here, take a couple questions from the audience, and we'll go to, I already have a couple here, feel free to add more, and if we don't get to them, we'll follow up with the blog post. But one from L'Oreal here, who asks Jamila, can you please share best practices for staff input on story gathering?
Let's see. I'm sure that I put some kind of document together at some point in time. I think what I did was I gave them some keywords, or I think I called it triggers in the document, things to listen for, and then just have them say, you know, oh, wow, that is a really great story. I'm so glad we were able to impact you or help you in this way. I would really love to be able to share that story. Would that be okay?
Yeah,
and then
right. Yeah, right. You're asking for permission, and then that's a foot in the door. Love it. Okay, keeping us moving right along here. Lisa says, would love to get Jamila's checklist and marketing brief if she's willing to share. Jamila, is that something you'd be open to us including in the follow-up email?
Yeah. Do you have them all already, Alyssa? Or I
have your brief. I don't think I have your checklist. So we'll connect on that.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Moving to our next question, and actually 2 people asked a similar question. Andrew and Becky both asked this in different ways. I'll read Becky since it's a little bit more detailed. She says, I work for a small nonprofit, only 9 full-time staffers and 1 person, me, on the marketing team. If I can't do all of these things, what's the first thing I should do as part of my marketing strategy? And Andrew similarly asks, how do you tackle such big picture goals when you're only a 1-person team with a lot of day-to-day deliverables? So Jamila, your team's a little bit larger, but any thoughts on that, on kind of what to prioritize first if you're a 1-person shop?
Sure. I think that the way that I generally tend to approach prioritization is looking at the organizational priorities. So
Yeah.
What are the top priorities, and how do you rank the priorities of the organization, and then do that?
Yep, 100% agree and echo that, and that's why we always say build your marketing plan around your strategic plan. But if you can't go that far, pick one organization-wide priority and decide where marketing can really deliver on that priority or contribute to it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I have to wrap us up here, so we ran a little short on time. So much good information. If you want to continue the discussion, you can do that at our closed Facebook group. Serves as a community for those of you who have been finding value in these webinars and just want kind of a support network of others who care about marketing and communications. URL is up on your screen here in the chat box, and we'll include it in the follow-up email. And then last but not least, just want to invite you to join us on the very last webinar in the series. In December, we will be talking with Steve Majors from Communities and Schools about really how to synthesize all of these commitments as you go into the new year and truly make 2020 the year of your nonprofit's marketing revolution. So really excited for that. If you want to discuss any of this more, here is our web URL. We're relaunching our website tomorrow, so keep a lookout for that. And my email address is on the screen, so feel free to drop me a line. Jamila, thank you. Best of luck with the rebrand and the anniversary and everything else you have going on. We really appreciated you being here today. I learned a ton.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great day. Talk to you next time.